2 years ago, Americans watched in horror as a crisis unfolded at the Kabul airport.
She was tear-gassed and beaten.
Images of thousands desperate to escape Taliban oppression filled our news feeds. More than 80,000 Afghans made it to America. But the story didn't end there.
It was very cold. There was no power, no heat.
Who would help our newest neighbors? I'm Andrea Smartin. In Stranger Becomes Neighbor, you'll hear the stories of some remarkable refugees who left their homes and their dreams behind, only to start over from zero.
Their only possession was 3 blankets.
And you'll meet Americans who stepped up to help them.
You want me to come when you deliver your baby.
What can one person do in the face of an international disaster decades in the making? That's Stranger Becomes Neighbor. Find us at kslpodcast.com. Follow us on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you listen.
In today's episode of Project Recovery,
I remember I probably withdrew so hard and so horrible in a jail cell in Davis County coming off methadone. But the dumbest thing is the minute that I'd walk out those doors, I had to have it immediately again.
make sure you listen to the end. Find us on Facebook at Project Recovery. We'll have that and much more coming up. Hey, welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, it's about recovery. And it's brought to you by our friends at knowyourscript.org. Dr. Matt, why is it so important to know your script?
I think it empowers you as the consumer of your own healthcare. Knowing your script has a few different meanings, right? One of them is know what you're taking. You know, investigate the prescription. What is it? Another one is know your script in how to talk to your physician. Like, are there alternatives to this this medication that you're giving me? And know how to talk to your kids about it. We've had several chances over the last year to talk to my own kids for little minor outpatient surgeries and talk to them about why it's important to try to avoid opiate-based medications if possible and use other alternatives. And I think they've appreciated that education because I didn't know those things growing up.
No, neither did I. Can I ask you real quick, how is your son's triple nipple surgery go?
Well, he's suffered relentless teasing by his brothers and maybe me, but he's pretty happy with it. It went off without a hitch. It probably would have been less of a big deal if we'd have done it when he was little. Now that he's almost 18, it was a little bit of a bigger surgery, but he's happy and proud to show off his stitches.
Hey, let me ask you this, and it's probably a little more, but what do they do with that third nipple? They just throw it away?
We already asked. I said, did you ask him if you could keep it? And he's like, no, I don't think you can keep it. And I was like, I bet we could have kept it. Dang it.
Yeah. So they probably just throw it away.
Well, they dispose of it through there's a hospital system they dispose of human waste.
All right, we've got a wonderful guest for you today on Project Recovery. Her name is Roseann. We're going to get to her in just a second. But before we do that, Dr. Matt, we always like to catch up on each other and see how things are going.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm feeling good. Yeah, things are good.
You've got this whole Santa vibe going right now.
Can you tell I trimmed up the mustache a little bit today?
Yeah.
I mean it's really white and getting kind of bushy, huh?
Yeah, I mean you've got the long hair, you've got the kind of full beard, a little gray on the sides. Like right before Santa becomes Santa, you're like the mid.
I was going for the young Santa look, but Ashley thinks I look more like Grizzly Adams.
You kind of got a Grizzly Adams thing going.
Yeah, I need just a little puffier on the side, and I need a bear to hang around with.
You look therapist-y, if that's a word.
Does it look therapist-y?
Yeah.
I'll take that.
I mean, when you think of a therapist, you look at someone who's kind of got longer hair, a full beard, probably got some cool glasses. And
to be honest, I've never had my hair this long in my life, and I've never grown out my beard before. This is the first time I've ever done that.
Thanks, COVID.
And so it still happens a few times a week where I'll be walking through the bathroom and catch my reflection in the mirror and not recognize myself for a moment. I'm like, who's that? Oh, that's me.
Oh, it's Grizzly Adams. I love it. Hey, you know me, and you've often said that I'm an eternal optimist.
You are.
And I'm still very optimistic. But that doesn't mean that the days aren't getting to me, man. It's
like in what way? Like because they're so short and it's dark and all that?
I think that plays a part into it, definitely. But also it's just the weight of the world. Every once in a while you got to stop and take a deep breath. And with the Christmas, the holidays, relationships, everything, you can understand why domestic violence is up. Substance abuse is up.
Mental
Suicide
health problems, suicide
is up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
for years and years. I've been in my practice and in my opportunities to speak in public. I talk a lot about mindfulness. Even if you're doing cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness improves your outcomes. So that means focusing in the present, being present focused. But I've never talked about it so much as I do now, because that's the thing. There's so many things out of our control going on right now. I had even forgotten about the earthquakes. And somebody brought those up the other day. I'm like, oh yeah, we even had earthquakes this year. And people getting so worried about the what ifs and the maybes and what could happen in the future. We still have some political uncertainty happening in the next month or so. And so that's the key, I think, is take care of yourself with the weather. And a lot of people, what we found is most people who are affected negatively by the seasonal affective stuff, they don't really meet full criteria, right? So they could technically say, I don't have SAD, but they meet a lot of the symptoms. And I think I'm one of those where you feel more lethargic. It's easy to give in to sitting around. You're a little bit less interested in doing, starting a project and doing that sort of thing.
You come home, there's chocolate covered pretzels on your doorstep.
Oh, I know. Isn't that the worst right now? People are so nice and it's killing me.
You're like, son of a gun, I said I wasn't going to eat any more snacks.
I know.
But I have to
it's
because
easy
it's a
to
Christmas
snack.
gift.
Right. You don't want to offend anybody. So take care of yourself that way. Take some vitamin D supplements, get some sunlight. I would say go on Amazon and order yourself a full spectrum light, and just have that for about 30 to 45 minutes in the morning and 30 to 45 minutes in the evening, to just kind of bolster that a little bit. And then try to stay focused in the present. Be mindful. Focus on what you can control, right? Not all the what ifs and maybes of the future.
Can I tell you why I'm really bummed?
Okay.
I've got 36 rolls of horrible toilet paper.
Horrible toilet paper?
Yeah. So I had to go to the Costco.
Like that one-ply rough stuff?
Well, it's what it is. I had to go to the Costco.
Did you go this last weekend?
Yeah.
They were out of all toilet paper and paper towels.
They had one thing of toilet paper.
Did they? Did you get it?
36 rolls of bamboo toilet paper.
Bamboo?
Single ply.
Wow.
It's rough on the tushy. And so I got it because we were out of toilet paper, so it's like some's better than none. And I got it home. And stocked every bathroom with it. I got 36 rolls of it.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be good for your environment, horrible for your butt.
Yeah, that's a problem. All year long, I've been threatening to do bidets in all the bathrooms of the house.
I want to get a bidet.
They're so expensive. But
I think you get those kits for $40.
You can get the ones that clip to your existing toilet. Yeah.
But I'm afraid my son's going to use it like a drinking fountain.
He might.
He might. So I'm just, but now.
Maybe only once, though. Maybe he'll learn his lesson.
I don't know. I got 36 rolls of bad toilet paper to continue on into 2021 because I'm too cheap to throw it away. And I'll be damned if I let my kids toilet paper.
Could you use it for other things? Oh, you don't want them toilet paper? I was going to say maybe you could use it for other things like toilet paper.
I think it was a little more expensive because it's good for the environment.
Well, it's made of bamboo. Yeah. So yeah. So I've never even heard of that.
No.
I'm glad you got to the Costco before I did, so I didn't have to be tempted to buy the bamboo.
Taking one for the team. That's what the Scott dog does.
There you go.
I love it. Hey, our guest today, Roseann. I'm sorry, I forgot your last name.
It's Nelson.
Nelson, and she reached out to me on Facebook. We've been trying to plan this for what?
Oh, a couple months now.
Yeah, and so we finally got it here. We're excited for you to be here. Where does the story of Roseann begin?
Oh my goodness, that's a good question. So I think maybe we can start with I grew up in East Layton. I had a good family. It was a little bit different because Mom was LDS and Dad wasn't LDS, and we lived obviously in a very LDS predominant neighborhood.
Sure.
And sometimes that was difficult. You always started feeling like you just didn't belong because I was that girl that would run around in short shorts, and lots of parents did.
I was that boy in my neighborhood.
Right?
But
he was the boy chasing the girls in the short shorts.
Yeah. Oh. Thanks for finishing that for me.
Well, there we go.
But so I understand that because that is, it's as Dr. Matt would say, those years are very developmental for you as a young person and trying to figure out who you are and where you belong. And so there were times that I fit in and there were times that I fit out. I remember when, like in the neighborhood, everyone was going to EFY. And I was like, ooh, what's this EFY? And they go, oh, this is the coolest party. We go down there and we hang out with these kids from all over the state. And I go, what is EFY? And it's especially for youth, which is it's kind of a weekend camp for the kids.
Yeah.
And I didn't get to go because I wasn't LDS, and when they'd come back, that's all they would talk about for the next month and how cool it was. And I remember feeling left out.
Yeah.
I think I could have gone if I
think you may not have enjoyed it as much as you think.
Well, I never even made it that far because my mom raised me LDS. So I would go to church, and I had some women that were in the ward that I would babysit and nanny their little kids. So I tried to participate as much as I could, but I was always kind of more of the little rebel. And you could feel that there was just a little bit of a difference. When I got into junior high, it was, a struggle having red hair, freckles. It wasn't like people were always the nicest to you. I remember when I was 13, going down the halls and boys would take off their belts and just like hit me with them and whip me with them. Yeah.
Whoa.
And so, right.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
And trauma started, so that
Glad
trauma.
I didn't grow up in Layton.
Was that just because you were redhead and freckles?
No, just boys being mean and I think not getting along with them very well. But I remembered that was like the first instant of me not wanting to go to school. The anxiety hits, all of a sudden you're having headaches. I'm putting in quotes, headaches. And I went to the doctor, and at that time, doctors prescribing Loratab or Ambien or Xanax.
So how old are you at the time?
I was 13 years old.
And you were getting Loratab and Ambien?
$30 a month. Yeah.
Wow, that's unfortunate. They didn't try something else like a SSRI, like Prozac first.
They did. So
like
they
that.
did put me on Prozac on top of everything else.
So just so our listeners know, how young are you right now?
So I'm 38.
So this was...
Oh, gosh.
25 years ago?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm glad somebody can do math because that made me have to stop and think for a minute.
I can't believe it was me. And I actually got
I'm
pretty
impressed,
close
buddy.
to it. Yeah.
It's all that reading you've been doing.
So 25 years ago, you start with Prozac, Loratab, Ambien.
Well, they gave it to me, but I hated swallowing pills. But my parents would fill the prescriptions every single month, so they were kind of stockpiled. And by the time I got to high school, things got more rough. There was some more sexual trauma that had happened. I had some people come to my house after I had shared with somebody about the sexual trauma. And next thing I know, the whole school's at my house. Somebody kicked in my front door.
Wait a second. So you had been sexually assaulted? Is that right? Mm-hmm. And somehow that inspired the neighborhood to come.
Well, no, I shared the experience with the girl. And then that person that I shared it with went and shared it with other people. And it ended up having kids react.
Maybe they were thinking you were not telling the truth,
yes,
and they were trying to defend, so to speak, the person accused.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Oh,
It was bad. So, at 16, that's when you learn, hey, these pills you can start taking. And so I started self-medicating and taking quite a bit of them to just numb out. I even moved out of my parents' house at that time and moved to Ogden, of all places. And my parents were kind of like, what's going on with my little girl? Like, this
At 16, you moved out on your own?
I did. Yep, on 32nd Street in Harrison. And I lied about my age, though. So I told these girls that were up at Weber State that I was 18 years old and just got an apartment there. And then I had my dad's friend owned Linquist Mortuaries, and he tried to give me a job and help and just try to watch over me because he was really close with my dad, and my dad and mom just were at a loss at that time of what can we do. But I didn't feel safe in my own home. Like, that was my place where I should be safe, and I lost all of that feeling. But I eventually ended up moving back home, and my parents immediately sent me to an adolescent center. They're like, this girl needs some help. So,
do you think they sent you to the adolescents because they didn't know what to do?
Yeah. Oh, of course. And at the time, it was like, I remember they said we were going to eat. We were all going to go eat together as a family.
That we're going to go eat dinner.
Yeah, we're going to go eat dinner. And then all of a sudden, we show up at Can I say the name of the center that I went
Sure.
to? So I went to Vista Adolescent Center. All of a sudden, I showed up in this place in Magna, and I like walk up, and I'm like, "Is there a restaurant around here?" And people are looking at me like I'm crazy. And then they take us in this house, and they do "You're gonna stay here," and I, of course, like lost my
Freaked out.
Yeah, lost my mind. I'm like, what?
How old were you at this time?
I was 17 at this time.
And would you say you were, so the medications you were prescribed generally fall under the benzodiazepine category, and those are quite addictive, especially if you're taking them daily. Would you say you were abusing benzos at that time?
Oh, yeah, and a lot of alcohol, and I mean, kind of everything I could get my hands on.
Which is kind of a dangerous mix for the listeners. You know, benzos and alcohol are not a good, healthy mix.
Oh, yeah.
So by 17, you were pretty hard into the alcohol and drug scene.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then after I got out of the adolescent center, I ended up going to Davis High. Because I was at Layton High at first, and I transferred over to Davis High.
How long did you spend in the adolescence?
I was there for about 6 months, and I tried to run away once. Oh, my goodness. That was a nightmare. Like, had the whole place looking for me, and I didn't know what was going on, and I was like this. And they had me go to my brother's graduation, where the person was that had done the things to me that were inappropriate happened to be there. And I saw all of these kids, and it triggered a lot of trauma. And then I went back to the center, and it was just, I wanted to be gone. Like, it was hard.
While you were at the adolescent center, did you talk to a therapist? Did you talk about your trauma?
Yeah, we talked about trauma. Yes, we did a lot of trauma work. And, you know, it was a good place. You know, Vista Adolescent Center is a really good center that I think it helped me a lot. But I wish it was the cure-all, but it wasn't at that time. I wasn't done. I got out.
I'm going to stop you right there because, Dr. Matt, I think this is fascinating because even when I was in recovery and talking to parents and being there myself, a lot of people think that these recovery centers are the cure-all. And that's not what they are. They can't be. There is no cure-all. Basically what it does is equips you to battle this and deal with it in healthy ways for the rest of your life. It sets you on a path and lets you know that you're doing this because of this, or if this happens, you've got these tools to deal with that. But there's so many family members out there and so many addicts that think that you're going to walk into it and be cured. I just have a problem with that because I don't think that's how it works.
Right. I think that's a naive expectation, but
it's an expectation though that
people have it. The center, a really good quality recovery center, whether it's for adolescents or for adults, they're well equipped. They have great staff. They have people that know what they're doing. They provide you with the treatment and the options that will be helpful to you. But that's only part of the piece. The other part has a lot to do with the person, him or herself. Are they ready to make that change? We've talked a lot about the stages of change on our show in the past. And the support outside of the center is a huge piece as well. We know that what's called recidivism, a lot of times people get into a hospital or a treatment center setting, do really, really well, but then they return home to chaos, and that home life isn't supportive of them. So there are a lot of factors. And, you know, you're telling us, whether you're not saying this, but I'm interpreting, you were a pretty strong-willed, intense teenager, right? Because I think all of us remember being 16 and thinking, oh, man, I wish I didn't live at home. She actually moved Ogden, right? She actually lied and got herself an apartment.
I told my parents I was leaving and packed a bag, and they let me go, and I didn't get past the front door. You're like, I don't know where I'm going. Right? I don't know where I'm going.
Right, I'll be home by dinner.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, this is a kid who has had trauma in her past, didn't really quite feel like she fit in, obviously struggling with anxiety, in an attempt to deal with all of that, turning to substances, but also personality factor is huge. You know, Casey, you're an optimist, and personality is how we perceive and interact with the world on a daily basis. And so if you have a real strong-willed teenager who's dealing with all that other stuff, then I have no doubt that you learned a lot of great skills and made some good relationships, perhaps with your therapist there at Vista. but you weren't done pushing back. Right. And so it's like giving you tools and skills, which eventually bring a person around to meeting their goals of sobriety and healthy behavior. But yeah, when you're 17 and you're ticked off and you have a strong will, it's usually a little bit of a longer road.
Oh, yeah. And it was. It continued back when I was, 19. That's when the Oxycontin boom kind of came out. And I was dabbling with alcohol and things like that, but that was mostly what I did at the time, was go to my friends and go to like Club Access, things like that. But then when Oxycontin came around and I had my ex-husband at the time introduced me to it, and that took me fairly quickly. And I was, I would do it, and then I was kind of just able to stop because I saw what it was doing to my ex-husband. It just took him so quickly. And for me, I couldn't understand, like, he would get so sick every time he tried to stop. And I'm like, why? How can you just not stop at this? Like, at that time, I didn't understand addiction like I eventually learned. And, he was like, I can't. And he ended up, so at 21, I'm kind of skipping around a little bit. So I had this boyfriend at 19. We did the whole Oxycontin thing off and on. And then when I was 20 years old, he had proposed to me. And I just knew it wasn't right. Like, he needed to get more help than I could even offer him. And he actually ended up at uni trying to get sober. I mean, he tried to get sober so many different times. And then eventually he started doing methadone. And I, at the time, so I got pregnant with my first son, and we ended up just getting married. And I would take him and I'm like, hey, you need to get a drug test. Like, I don't want to marry you if you're still using. And at
this time, were you not using as well?
I was not using at this time. Nope. I was not using at this time. And I was pretty set on staying sober. Like, I wanted to have a family. I wanted to have that fantasy life of raising the kids and doing things like that. In fact, I was working for a mortgage company. I was actually doing pretty decent in life at that time. And I ended up, I married him, but he had a friend that worked at a drug testing place that did the drug tests for him. And so he peed in the cup, and then they dumped the pee out, and his friend peed for him. And so it came up that it was clean. And so I was like, okay, let's get married. And then on our honeymoon,
most people ask for the father's hand in marriage. Right? Is that okay?
Yeah,
pee in a cup.
Pee in a cup.
No, we're doing this way. Anyway, but he, the marriage obviously didn't work. He was using a lot of methadone, and I finally kind of gave up. I was 6 months after having my baby, and, I had opened up my own mortgage company. And was just doing it out of my house. That was before the big crash, and I was doing well. And then, I just kept catching him using. And then after that, I was like, hey, I'm going to try this methadone if it's so good. And then that became my drug of choice. And So
that was your thought. This guy is having a problem with it. I'm having a problem with it because he's got a problem with it. But I think I'm going to try it now.
How messed up of a thought is that?
Do you think that was sort of joining with your husband? To me, that sort of decision sounds so illogical because it was probably much more emotion based.
Yeah.
There's something driving a wedge between us. But if I join with him on that, maybe it'll bring us closer together. And as you talk about it in sort of a logical setting like this, it sounds a little nuts, right?
Yeah.
But that makes sort of sense to a young person who's trying to have a close relationship with their spouse. I mean, I could see how that was an emotional decision, but and you had some use in your background, and you kind of knew it felt good probably to be a little off, Yeah.
I was ready to be more off. And unfortunately, it That marriage obviously didn't work out, but I was hooked on everything again. That's
So when you tried methadone, it got you back into the scene.
Got me back into the scene. So.
I want to stop you because you're the first person that has brought up methadone. I mean, I think we've talked about it as a way to get off of pills, but no one has ever said that was their drug of choice.
Oh, it was mine.
So what is methadone? I mean, what is it? A similar high? Because my knowledge of methadone that I've heard is that it takes away the cravings, but you don't get no euphoric feeling. Is that true?
No, I don't believe that. Yeah, it would mess me up. I remember going to Lake Powell with my family, and I would just nod off all the time. There was I couldn't ever keep my eyes open. It made me so high, and it was like I had this whole way of taking it. I consider it a synthetic heroin, and I don't think methadone is always the best choice. I had to withdraw, because I started getting in trouble with the law over and over again. And I remember I probably withdrew so hard and so horrible in a jail cell in Davis County coming off methadone. But the dumbest thing is the minute that I'd walk out those doors, I had to have it immediately again. So, methadone, it can be used in, I think, good medical ways, but I think people end up starting to take it. They like it, and the withdrawal from methadone, if you're not tapering down the correct way, can be difficult. So that's why I would always recommend Suboxone or something along those lines, because methadone was my drug of choice. I would go there.
And I think that's true, and they've learned that over the years, people who administer methadone in clinics to help people get clean. If you're not using it appropriately with a plan under the supervision of a medical professional, then it can become an abusable drug. And so a lot of people who are using it with not in those circumstances, they're taking way more than would be prescribed for coming off of heroin. And so that's become a problem, and there certainly still are methadone clinics, but if you're not following the protocols, then of course it can turn into its own addiction for people. And so Suboxone and other medications have started to become used a little bit more frequently, I think, than methadone. But back in the 90s, early 2000s, that was kind of what was the most available.
The thing.
Yeah. All right, so let's get back to your story. So out of love and some kind of irrational thinking, you decided to get back on methadone to be closer to your husband. And then it opened up the floodgates for all of your drug use.
My drug use. We separated.
So it didn't work?
It didn't work. No, it didn't work. And we, at that time, though, after the separation, I started building this cocktail of medications. So I would be taking methadone, Xanax, Ambien, drinking alcohol. I don't know how I'm alive today. And, that's one thing I have to thank my higher power for, because I never thought in a million years that I would still be here with the amount of drugs that I was putting into my body at that time. And of course, it didn't just stop there. It ended up getting so much worse. Like I stated, I started getting in trouble. I got a DWI, a DUI, shoplifting started. And I wouldn't even know I was shoplifting. I was so messed up, driving around and doing these things that just, you look back now and it's like, what?
And so at this point, how old are you?
So I was about 25. So I was getting older. And
where were you living?
So I was at my parents', and my kids would be with me 50% of the time, but my mom and dad would be the ones having to take care of. I was so miserably depressed. I would just go sleep in the basement, never get up, never, just trying to even interact with them. And my parents, I can't thank them enough, because the support and the love that they gave my children at that time was just huge. I wish I could have been that mom. I really do. But I am that mom now to those kids. But if it wasn't for my mom and dad and, my ex-husband started getting help. He started taking Suboxone, and he started working on his own life, and he had help with his mother to help raise the kids. But at that time, and eventually my parents kicked me out. They were like, "You're not getting better. This isn't working, and we need you gone."
How many kids did you have by then?
So at that time I had 2 kids. I had 2 boys.
And I assume you'd lost the mortgage business by then?
Yep, lost the mortgage business by then and became homeless. I would live, try to live with friends for a little bit, but I would be too messed up. And they're like, "Oh, we can't have you here." Started breaking the law where I would go look for houses and say, "Yeah, I'm going to pay you rent," and then start stealing people's, stealing their money and stealing and saying I'm paying this way, and then that wouldn't work out. And I did that for quite a few years, or probably a year and a half. And then after that, I finally ended up getting picked up in Davis County, and I did the RSAT program.
I don't know what that is.
So the RSAT program is a substance abuse program in the jail. So you're there for about 6 months, and then you get out and you go to court. It's kind of like drug court. I don't know.
Okay. I know what drug court is.
Yeah. It's a step above drug court. And I did that for a while, and I was able to stay sober. I graduated through that program. And then shortly after that, I had my kids back in my life, and I ended up becoming a bartender, and that probably would have been the worst job that I could have taken. But I didn't understand recovery at that time. At that time, I didn't know 12-step meetings. I didn't know and get, some of the treatment that people are getting. I didn't have the experience quite yet.
But I think that's pretty common, Dr. Matt, for a lot of people who go through a situation like that and they graduate the RSAP or the drug court or something like that, and they think, well, that was just a phase.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a phase, or we've talked a lot about on our show that, sobriety does not mean the absence of, to not use, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's still the mentality of a lot of people that can recognize. I assume by this point you recognize that your substance abuse was causing major problems in your life, and so the natural idea is, well, if I just don't use, then everything will be okay.
Yeah.
And that's not sobriety, right? That's not recovery, really. It's not the change of mind that's required in order to live a higher quality life. It's just walking around bare knuckling it all the time, and still in the process probably of making poor decisions. So as soon as you said I became a bartender, I was like, oh, there you go.
And then it got worse. Yeah, and then it got worse. And, I was that person that was like, ooh, I would never use a needle. I would never go that route of ever using drugs like that. I take pills. I get my medications from doctors. I had that thought in my head.
Isn't it funny, that justification that you're like, I'm taking opiates, but I wouldn't do it the dirty way. I do it the clean, appropriate way.
They're at the
but
point.
So many people have that thought process, right?
I literally asked my doctor once, the one that was giving me methadone, and I was like, can I still go to the temple if I wanted to be LDS? I'm like, can I still go to the temple with taking this medication? And I was thinking, that just means, okay, what I'm doing is not a problem. I'm okay to be abusing this, and it's okay. You
get the temple pass.
I get you.
I'm pretty sure that's not what a temple recommend does.
No.
I don't know much about it, but I don't think it's good for that.
No, and I was nowhere near any way that I could even go to the temple at that time. But I remember trying to impress my doctor, saying something like that, and just seeing oh, well, maybe what I'm doing is not that bad.
Well, you're just grasping for justification, right?
Yeah.
That's that process. You're still in an addiction process because you're always looking for ways to justify the use.
You're negotiating.
Yeah.
And you're rationalizing and justification and all those things that end in ION.
Yeah.
And which seems to be a big part of addiction.
Yeah. Huge.
And so you say you go take a job as a bartender, and then you said something that so many people have said, and they've been sitting in that same chair as you, then it got worse.
So,
but just to keep everyone to speed, you've been to a youth center,
a youth private program. I did RSAT.
Spent 6 months in jail.
Did 6 months. Oh, more than that. I mean, I was in and out of jail. I mean, like literally 13 times in a few year period. It was bad.
And then it got worse.
God, it got a couple times worse.
Whoa.
You think that's bad. It got a couple times worse. So, no, after that, I met this, I had a group of friends, and us girls, we would go and, we were drinking, and I was like, oh, I never really drink. I mean, I did drink. Yeah, I justified it. Like, oh, no big deal. And we would go out and go to concerts, and we would hang out and have a good time. But then I met this boy, and I thought this kid was just so dreamy and so cute. And then I found out he was a heroin addict. And you would think at the time that, like,
that'd be a huge red flag?
That would be, yeah, right. But not me. I was like, I can save him. I can get him off this heroin.
I've been through the RSAP program.
Would you say at least at that age, or did you kind of have an attraction to the thrill of life, like something kind of exciting instead of hearing, oh, he's a heroin addict, and a lot of people feeling like, ooh, that's kind of scary, I want to stay away. Was there sort of a pull towards those exciting, on the fringe of society people and behaviors?
I think there was. I definitely think there was. And I also had this I want to save people complex. My partner, my boyfriend now, he always calls it, like, makes fun of me and says I'm Mother Teresa because I just want to always be trying to save those type of people.
I want to ask you this because, now I know that I don't know everything, but you had asked me 5 years ago, I thought I was the smartest guy in the room. I thought I was smarter than everybody else. That happened to everybody else, but not me. Why? Because I'm smarter.
Yeah.
And I know now that I'm not smarter. And I'm happy to be the dumbest guy in the room because that means I've got some people to learn from. And I really do think that I do cherish that, Yeah. Do you think you felt a little of that?
I think there was that too. Oh, definitely. Oh, I think completely. And then it was like I didn't – and when it came to, like, the heroin and things like that, I was like, well, I don't know if this is something that I really want to be trying or dealing with. But then I started doing it with him, and it took me quick. It took me real fast.
Really?
Yeah.
So do you remember the conversation with yourself before? So did you start with needles? We had a guest on last week who said he never did needles because he could smoke it.
Yeah. No, So I don't think I ever tried smoking it, ever. I think so my dad was diabetic and he had needles. And so I had this little black pack and I got his needles and I got alcohol pads and I got like a doctor's wrap thingy. And I thought that I was going to be doing it like a doctor would do it. And
like a doctor would do heroin.
Yeah, right.
Like a doctor.
But crazy enough, we've had a doctor on the show who did heroin.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of them, yeah.
See? And so it was crazy. And I remember, like, showing up and, like, okay, I really want to try this. And I, at the time, had more money. And I realized this person was most likely taking advantage of me because I had money and I was the one constantly paying for it. But during that time, I got there was a couple overdoses. In fact, I lost one time I remember mixing. So I had gotten in a fight with this boyfriend and he was driving and he was swerving and I thought he was going to kill us. So I'm like, I have to drive. And he lost his mind over it. And so he left and I went to my home. And for the first time, I had never shot up by myself, and it happened to be coke and heroin. And when my parents hear this story, they're going to die. But I had ended up trying it for the very first time all alone. And I went out and I woke up 4 or 5 hours later. I don't know. I didn't know where I was, what was going on. I still had the tourniquet on my arm, and I had lost all the feeling in my left arm. I couldn't move it. I couldn't do anything. I ran downstairs to my dad, and I was just like, something's wrong with my arm, and he was asleep. And he's like, and they had no idea what was going on at the time. Like, my parents, they allowed me in their home, and they had no idea that my addiction, I would just sit up in my room and it just, my dad's like, okay, you can take the car if you need to go to the hospital. And I remember having calling this boyfriend and being like, I can't feel my arm. I just woke up. I have no idea what's going on. And the first thing he said to me was like, well, you can't come over unless you get more heroin. And I'm just like, I can't even move my arm right now. Like, what am I supposed to be doing?
And he only cares about heroin.
And he only cared about getting heroin. And what did I do?
Got heroin.
I found somebody, got heroin, and took it to him just so that he would take me to the hospital. So, yeah, it was kind of crazy.
Not kind of. It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy because my self-worth at that time, it was like I never felt like I was good enough to deserve better. And I thought that's what I deserved, and after that experience, I was like, I don't think I can do this heroin stuff anymore. And then methamphetamines, that was the other part that took over. And it took me quick. I dropped down in 3 months. I mean, I was always alone doing it. I lost my mind. I mean, I constantly thought people were outside getting me. I ripped out probably every screen in my parents' house thinking people, and my mom and dad had they knew something was wrong. They didn't get it.
Did they try to talk to you about these things? Because it sounds like your behavior went from being isolative to now kind of crazy. Like you're taking screens out of the house and your arm is numb. And like, did they try to pin you down on what was going on?
Not really. And I think they just were so naive to all of it. Like they knew something was going on. Obviously, they knew something was going on.
Well, most people have no exposure really to that culture of drug use and that it's a whole different lifestyle from what they would.
Yeah, well, none of my family had ever experienced anything like that. Like my sister has her doctorate; she's an English professor. My brother is an LCSW. Like my family is not a family that does things like this.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, there were multiple suicide attempts. I mean, it's crazy how selfish you become and how crazy you are. And here. These two little boys that just wanted their mom. They just wanted their mom, but I was so...
What was your relationship with them like at that time?
So they would come over every other weekend, and oftentimes they would just come say hi to me in my room, but that was about it. There was not a
Grandma and Grandpa took care of him.
Grandma and Grandpa took care of him. Grandma and Grandpa took care of him because I was just not in a place to... ever be. Had
their father gotten clean by then?
Their father, yeah. He had been clean by then. And so he was really their main support besides my parents. I mean, they did step up quite a bit, and I finally had gotten sober. From those, I cold turkeyed it. I was like, I can't keep living like this.
So after you
I want to hear about her suicide attempt. So what? Okay. Tell me about. I mean, is that okay if we talk about that for a second?
I mean, because
I think people need to understand that this devolving sense of self, as a person goes month after month, year after year, realizing that their life is getting worse and worse. They're not connected to their parents, their family, their children, their work. You start to lose hopefulness. A person feels hopeless about their own future. And so depression is a common, of course, result. And then severe depression can lead to suicide. What was that like for you? And did anybody know about your suicide attempts?
So my family, my brother was getting married, and I was supposed to be going to the wedding, but I had done meth at somebody's house, and then I got home and I tried to pack a bag, but all the clothes were still in the washing machine. And so I ended up missing my brother's wedding. And so they were all gone. And I had a really, really close friend that through this whole period, he would come and see me. He wanted to support me. He tried to take me away from this environment. He was trying to just be there for me like nobody had been. And I had a best friend named Audrey, and she, of course, was in the Air Force, and so she was in Germany, and she would constantly be calling and trying to check on me. But one night, since I missed the wedding, and I finally was like, nothing is working. I had 90 of the 2 milligram Xanaxes, and I had taken almost all of them and a bunch of other medications, and I had written notes to my kids, my mom, everybody, and that was kind of it. And I didn't reach out to anybody, but this friend of mine, he just had a really, really strong feeling that he needed to come to my house. And he lived in Brigham City at the time, of all places. And so he drove from Brigham City and came all the way down to my house and just walked in. And he never would have done that, never would have walked in. And he walked in and came straight up to my room, and he saw me, and he was like, this isn't okay. And he ended up getting help. And I, of course, obviously I'm here today, but...
Do you feel like that saved your life?
He saved my life. And he was just like, I had this feeling that I needed to come down here and I needed to be here. And he did. And if it wasn't for him, I know that I wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't be here right now. And so he is one person that I've always stayed extremely close to, because he was, through all the chaos, through everything, he was one constant besides my best friend, Audrey, that, happened to just be there for me.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. That intuition to do something. It's a good long drive. What, 45 minutes, an hour,
Right.
something like that, to just pop in on someone. That's impressive.
I don't like to throw the word around, but that's a miracle.
That's a miracle.
I mean, it really is that he was going to come down and do that.
Yeah.
On the day that you wrote letters to your family members, to your kids, and took over close to 90 Xanaxes and other prescriptions.
Yeah. Yeah.
You missed your brother's wedding. You're currently hooked on meth at this time, right?
I was, yes. And then after all of that, I had enough. I mean, even the people, the drug people that I was doing it with, they didn't want anything to do with me because I was crazy. I mean, I was crazy, and I was tiny, and I was just sickly looking. And so I finally was like, I need to try to get sober. And I left this person and...
The heroin guy.
But jumped into another crappy relationship with somebody else. And, all these stories are so long. They're so long ago because my life is so great right now. But
and that's amazing.
Talking about this, but I ended up in another crappy relationship with somebody that was a drug addict too. And he abused methamphetamines constantly, and he would go crazy, absolutely crazy, and become very abusive. And I got pregnant with a son with him. And but during being pregnant, I couldn't even maintain sobriety. It was just, I started taking painkillers, and I was justifying, my doctors again. My doctors are giving them to me. I'm getting them from my midwife. It's okay. I'm doing it this way. And, but that was it was just a bad time. But the problem was I wasn't just getting them from my midwife. I was getting them from multiple other doctors as well.
Doc shopping and getting as many pills as you can, right?
Yep. And so that led me, 6 months after my son was born, I ended up getting charges. And so
For doc shopping?
For doctor shopping. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up back in jail for another 6 months. And I remember my son's father would come and see me, and he would be just high as a kite, out of his mind. He would talk to the cops and be like, she's not really here, huh? She's not really here. And I don't know how. Like they even let him in
Yeah.
to see me, because I was at the work center in Davis County,
Mm-hmm.
and he would bring my baby boy. Like my son was 6 months old. I mean, it was heartbreaking, you know. And then I knew at that point, like when I got out, I couldn't go back to that environment. But at that time, like I didn't really have anywhere else to go. I mean, I had burned a lot of bridges with my family. Like everybody was like, we don't really know what to do with you. And so I went back into this crazy household because that's where my son was. But he shortly after he relapsed on methamphetamines again, like I ended up calling my PO, and he came over and he's like, you just really can't be here anymore. And so that's when my parents were like, come home, bring the baby. And so I got away from that relationship. But it's when you leave an abusive relationship that you've been in, it was a very strange feeling. It was like a death had happened. Mm-hmm. Like I just was like, it was like I was grieving like this death, and I didn't realize how sick I had become and how attached I was sick to that process.
Well, it's probably a lot of codependence, and when you break that codependent bond, it is like losing a sense of yourself, because that's the problem with codependency is you're trying to gain a sense of self through being in a relationship with someone else instead of being independently, you know, have an identity of your own, and
your worth is directly tied to this person,
right? Your worth,
and it gives you a purpose,
exactly. Yeah. And so when that bond, that relationship is broken, it's like losing a sense of who you are. So calling it like a death is very accurate.
Yeah, it was interesting, and I, you know, I did well. I was able to stay off meds, but I was going to my PO and checking in, and I was like, okay, I've got like 3 months left. But, you know, he would still do kind of crazy things. He would text my phone and act like he was certain friends of mine and be like, hey, I got a new number. And I would start talking to him, and then I'd find out it was him. So there was like all of these crazy mind games that were happening.
So your PO was trying to catch you in?
Not my PO. No, the ex.
Oh, okay.
The ex was doing some crazy.
Yeah.
No, the crazy things.
That's an interesting
like that.
PO technique.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
No, and so
might get you fired as a PO.
Yeah. No, none of that happened. But no, he. After that, I ended up having. You know, God, this is so embarrassing talking about this. I was on birth control, but I ended up getting pregnant again. And the baby just wasn't able to come to term. And so I had to, of course, abort the baby at that time. And then I was taking a ton of painkillers. Like I just had lost my mind. Like there was this 6-month period of not even knowing who I was, not knowing what was going on. Like I was hallucinating, but I wasn't on drugs that would make you hallucinate. Like I literally could have been in a mental hospital. Like my parents.
Well, you over the years had done a lot of damage to your brain and stressed it out constantly. And so, yeah, people can, you know, you can have what are called drug-induced hallucinations where you've created so much damage through your drug abuse that even when those drugs aren't in your system, the brain is still trying to recover and bounce back and is not functioning properly.
Yeah. And I think that's what was going on. And so my PO called me the day that I had to abort the baby, and he's like, we need to have you come in and talk. And we need to talk. And I said, okay, I just had this happen. Can I come in 2 days? And I went in 2 days. And during this process, they were trying to figure out where the baby was. And they were taking my blood every 2 days. So I had a lot of needle marks in my arm. And I got there, and they immediately were like, what's going on? And I said, well, this has happened. And he's like, what's going on with your taking your pills? And I admitted, like, I'm not taking them the way I'm supposed to be taking them. So they sent me to this room, and a couple other POs came in there, and some that I knew, that one of them I actually grew up with. And I felt so shameful. And I remember feeling like, oh, I thought I could figure life out this time. And they pulled up my arms, and they saw the needle marks, and I'm sure they're like, yep, she's using heroin. So they, of course, locked me up, and the judge ended up sentencing me to prison. And so I ended up going to prison for violating my probation. And so that was the first violation I had had. And so I never thought that that's where they would end up sending me. But it's weird to say that, but I'm grateful and I'm blessed that they did send me there. At first it was kind of, scary, but there was this weird feeling that I had over me, like everything was going to be okay. Like I just knew in my heart, like this is going to be okay. And I was calm. I was more calm than I would have thought I would have been. And they put me in the Excel drug program. And at the time, it was like I was ready to turn my life around. And I remember talking to one of the girls in the program because they would go to church every, Sunday. And, we had this perfect view of the Draper Temple out our window. And I was sitting there looking out the window and this girl that, was really into the church was like talking about it. I'm like, God, I just don't get it. I just don't know if there is really a God. And shortly after that, I had received paperwork that my ex's family was trying to get full custody of my son. And I had gotten word that my dad became extremely depressed and ended up at uni for not wanting to live. And that was kind of my breaking point. And I got down on my hands and knees and finally prayed for the first time ever and was like, I don't know what's up there. And this sounds crazy, but I had one of the most spiritual experiences I've ever experienced in my life. And I knew from that moment on that things were going to be different. And I did everything I could. I started going to church. I started reading more into the scriptures and I kind of understood them. And it was just, I needed that extra belief that there was something greater and bigger out there. And I wanted to be one of those women that doesn't come back. I wanted to be one of those women that actually succeeds and that can make a difference in the world with their story. And so I fought like crazy for my son. There's this amazing, it's ran by Shannon Cox. It's called Journey of Hope. They helped me get an attorney for me to fight for custody of my son while I was behind bars. And I'm grateful they did that because I was able to, keep custody of him. And then right when I got out, I knew I needed to go to a sober living. And that's what I did. I went to a sober living in Utah County.
How long did you spend in prison?
So I was there for 18 months.
Whoa.
Yeah. 18 months I was there.
Year and a half.
Yeah. A year and a half. And just,
this isn't jail. This is prison.
This is prison. Yeah. And I had pictures. I wish I brought them, but they did this. So some of the women that were doing well at the prison, they did this special thing where your kids could actually come to the prison and they had certain like soccer characters and things like that. And I happened to be chosen. And so I have some amazing pictures of me behind bars playing in a baseball field with my son, who was 2.5 at the time. And it's pretty interesting because you see me in my prison gear and you see me talking to him. And it's weird because you can see the towers and the fences all behind us. And I think a lot of people wouldn't put their children in a situation, but my kids just were so happy to see their mom.
I love that you said we've got this amazing picture. Yeah. Because to you that is amazing.
Yeah.
To where you've been and where you're going. You know what I mean? 18 months in prison, to have your son come there and see the smile on his face and be able to see that his mom's doing okay. Yeah. I'm getting chills. I think that is, I love that you said amazing. I really do, because I think most people would think that's horrible. How horrible.
Yeah. Yeah, and they wanted their mom.
Yeah, they just wanted their mom.
Yeah.
And they didn't care if they had to go to prison to see their mom. They wanted their mom. Mm-hmm. I think that's great.
Yeah, thank you. And so, that's where my boys, they're amazing kiddos. What they've gone through, the lives that they've lived with having a mom be in and out of jail, I knew that I wanted to give them a life with a mother again. And so, I was really surprised when I got to the sober living. It was like there was like a rainbow in the sky on the day that I got out. And I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is a new start. Like, this is going to be it. And I went to apply for some jobs in the recovery industry. And I was sharing earlier with you, but I got a job at Annie's house as a case manager. 12 days out of prison. I didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing. Like, I loved it. I knew I wanted to be in the recovery industry. I knew I wanted to help women. I knew that's where my heart was. And to have these people see something in me and believe that I could make a difference was something that I hadn't felt.
I hadn't experienced that in a long time.
Yeah, not in a long time. And there was just this big self-worth piece that had to come apart. Like, I had to realize that I'm not just this druggie. I'm not just this felon. These are just labels that I don't have to be anymore. I'm not that person anymore. And so I was able to experience some of working in recovery for a little bit, but I wasn't ready to dive. Like, I just didn't even know. I remember they offered me a marketing position, and I was like, what? Am I getting a demotion? Like, I had no idea how the whole industry, it worked at the time. And I was still trying to figure out life outside of prison. Like, I didn't know. It takes a while to adjust. And so, but I ended up leaving the industry and kind of was moved back home and stayed with my kids and was doing that. And I ended up getting a call, and somebody wanted me to start doing some work with biofeedback. And they really wanted me to start working and helping out with this one company. And I ended up happening to work back in treatment at Corner Canyon Recovery doing biofeedback. And
what is biofeedback?
So biofeedback is a type of technology, so similar to neurofeedback. It's all about, so the equipment I used was galvanic skin response. So it's where you're putting your hand on a hand cradle, and it's picking up different vibrations and different frequencies that your body is putting out. And so that's kind of where it started, getting into the industry of biofeedback and neurofeedback. And I loved that piece because, I was able to go back and start working with recovery clients again. And I did that for 2 years, but the neurofeedback piece is what kept calling my name.
And that's what you're doing now. I want to hear a little bit about that in a second. Okay. But before we get too far ahead, what kind of stuff did you do while in prison for your recovery? Was it a 12-step? I mean, what kind of stuff did they do with you?
So I would go to the AA meetings that they had there. I did their recovery program. So we would have a therapist that would come in, and we would meet, every single day for 3 hours. I also went to school while I was there. They had like a DATC program. It was a business technology class. So I made sure that I was doing that. You could go to the gym. So I was doing some working out, things like that. Being in touch with my spirituality, going to church. So there were some recovery things that I was doing while I was there, and had a better understanding of what recovery actually was.
I love it. And so because of that, you got out and kind of introduced into the recovery world. And from there, you got into the biofeedback. And now today, you're a business owner again.
Yeah, I'm a business owner, and I have all of my kids. And I should mention, I have all of my kids in my life. Like, I have full custody of my 7-year-old that I fought really hard for. I have a new baby girl. Well, she's 2. She's my baby girl. I'm in a very healthy relationship. I have a home. I have a car that I never thought I would own. I have my own business that I never thought I could have anything like this. I was just a meth addict. I was just a heroin addict. I was addicted to pills. I was just these labels. But I was able to grow into this person where now I just want to give back and help others. And so that's where the neurofeedback comes into play.
Now, you were talking to Dr. Matt a little bit about the neurofeedback, and I'm going to be honest with you, it's way above my pay grade. But for those listening, what is neurofeedback?
So what neurofeedback does is it trains certain areas of the brain to try to respond differently. So people that are struggling with ADHD or depression or anxiety, or even people with TBIs, people with insomnia. It's an umbrella of things that it can help with. But basically, we put just these little EEG sensors on your head, and we are using something called operant conditioning, where you watch a TV screen of something that you like. And the screen, I set the computer at a certain brainwave state that I'm wanting to train. And if you're not in that brainwave state, the screen will start to fade, the volume will start to go down, and your brain is wanting that reward. So it's going to do what it can to try to get the screen to show again and to come up brighter. And through different times of training, oftentimes you will see amazing results.
Now, Dr. Matt, is there some science behind?
There is. There's a growing body of research that shows that both biofeedback and neurofeedback are helpful for certain things. I think that it's still kind of in the growth stage of the scientific body of literature, but there is evidence to show that it's helpful, and its operant conditioning is used in lots of different therapy settings. It's basically, positive reinforcement is what we're talking about with that term operant, which is from our good old buddy B.F. Skinner.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the 40s.
B.F. Skinner.
Yeah. And so the idea is that by focused concentration, the feedback that the technician gives to the patient helps the patient tap into different areas of his or her own brain and bolster the activity that's happening there. And if we can do that in a focused way, then the idea is that we can increase things like attention, concentration, and control over our moods and things like that. So it's an exciting field and a growing field for sure.
If people want to find out more information about you and the neurofeedback, where would they go?
So if you want to learn more, you can go to www.neuroenhance.com, or you can get a hold of me at 801-690-5908. On Facebook and Instagram, it's under NeuroEnhance. My company name is Center for Neuroenhancement, but we shortened it up a little bit. The equipment I'm using is called Brain Core Therapy. And they have a wealth of information with research articles. Because neurofeedback has been around for 50 years. It doesn't get the credit it deserves because, like we were talking about earlier, since it can help so many conditions, people, medical providers are like, how can this really be helpful? But I'm seeing autistic children. I'm working with 6-year-olds that have ODD, ADHD. I've worked with addicts. I've worked with people that have manic depression. I have people that have OCD. So there are so many people that this can help with. So
I love it. And Dr. Matt, my takeaway on today's podcast is I love the way you tell your story. I really do. I find it just wonderful. And you said this is your first podcast. I don't think it'll be your last because your story is an amazing, powerful one. But the real takeaway for me is when you said, I don't have to be that person anymore. These are just labels, and I get to decide, and I don't want to be that person anymore. And to me, you're not that person. I didn't even know you as that person. I think you're an amazing person, and thank you for sharing your story. Dr. Matt?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for being open and honest. Hopefully your parents will be okay with hearing some details about your story, and probably good for them to hear that and helps them see how far you've come as well. I just think the power, maybe the theme I would say in your story is the power of identity, of a sense of self. When we make that commitment to be who we want to be, then it's easier to shed the labels that others and ourselves have that are negative we've given ourselves, and to be empowered to actually become a recovered person as opposed to somebody who's just not using, right? And I think that shift happened for you while you were in prison, and obviously since you've been out, you've been running with a real sense of who you are. Maybe, I'm guessing, for the first time in your life, because your story starts as a young kid not fitting in, and that's so common, where when we don't fit in, it's hard to develop a sense of who we are, and then that, of course, gets derailed through the years with your drug use. So I'm glad to know you and excited to hear more about how you're doing over time.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the self-discovery and not feeling like I belong, it's been a process. Like, it's something that I've constantly had to do continual work on, but I've got some amazing mentors in my life, and I think that's the important thing, is constantly doing your own work. You know, I have an amazing therapist. I believe everybody should still have a therapist if you're working in the field of recovery or helping other people. I think it's just important to have those connections. And I'm just so grateful that I have the people in my life that I've had, especially Cheryl Kale. She's the owner of Corner Canyon Recovery, and she's somebody that believed in me when I didn't think a lot of people did. And she's somebody that I will always be eternally grateful for giving me the gifts and like instilling in me, like, I can do things. I can do these big, hard things. And I've became this person that I'm actually really proud of today.
And we're proud of you, too. Thank you for stopping by and sharing your story with Project Recovery. Don't forget, Project Recovery is a KSL podcast.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.
Two friends taking pictures of the rising full moon on a summer night.
Two teenage kids doing what teenage kids do.
When a stranger with a gun and a death wish changed everything.
It was violent, it was senseless, and I will never understand it. I will never accept it.
I'm Amy Donaldson, and unfortunately, we're all too familiar with stories about how violence shatters lives. But what we rarely see is how they are rebuilt. In a new podcast, The Letter, we relive tragedy, but only so we can hear the rest of the story. The struggle to reclaim lives, the realities of grief, and the possibilities of forgiveness.
I believe in miracles. Sometimes I thought, there are no miracles. Yeah, there are, and this is a big one.
Follow The Letter at theletterpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.